Welcome back to FedSmart podcast. We have a exciting episode today. I don't know if you can call it exciting, but
It's exciting because
educational
you'll get
nonetheless.
answers.
Yeah. It depends who you ask. Actually, I don't think anyone will find that, but still really good information. And today we are covering Medicare. So get your caffeine ready. We're going to cover Part A, Part B, how FEHB plays into it, how possibly TRICARE plays into it, how they marry together potentially. And so, Jesse, why don't you get us going?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great thing to go over. It's good knowledge to have. It's not necessarily fun to talk about, but we'll make it as fun as we can because it is important.
We get a lot of questions on it. So
yeah, we do, and as we should, because there's penalties if you don't make the correct decision or not necessarily the correct one, but maybe a decision can have an impact. And I think that the looming possibility of penalties scares people, and so there's a lot of information to know, and so we'll be able to break it down into a really good amount of information that you will have a good foundation that as a federal employee you can approach. The other thing that's out there is there's a lot of people who help people acquire Medicare supplements and Medicare Advantage plans, and they're not really well versed in the federal system, some of them. And there's misinformation that gets out there because of people who are just trying to sell you a Medicare supplement or Medicare Advantage, and they tell federal employees incorrect information. And don't get me wrong, there's a lot of great people out there that help people with their Medicare as well. There's just some that come from a place of not fully understanding the federal system, and therefore some misinformation is out there, and we see that. And so, Stephen, as you know, I've studied Medicare for a long time. I've worked with a lot of people on their Medicare planning, really did some deep diving into it. So I'll jump into it a little bit more today, and then you can correct me if I muddy information together. But I
I'll
do
keep you
know
honest,
the Medicare.
buddy.
Yeah, make sure I'm not talking too fast, as I always do. Steven says sometimes he's not able to throw in his advice and comment because sometimes Jesse doesn't take a breath. I like talk and talk and talk and talk, and then all of a sudden it's been 30 minutes. And so I feel sorry for my wife, but she's
Do
stuck
your
with
thing,
me, and I
buddy.
love her. Yeah.
Just do your thing. No worries.
And so with Medicare, for all intents and purposes, most of the time you're first eligible when you're turning 65. And there are other exceptions, such as if you were on Social Security disability and things like that. But today we're talking about from a retirement perspective and general eligibility. And so that's when you're turning 65. And when you're turning 65, you're eligible to get on Medicare. If you're still working, you can decide if you want to get on Medicare or not when you're 65. But there's a couple parts of Medicare. And the main part first that we want to look at is Part A, which is hospitalization coverages. If you're inpatient hospital care, that falls under Medicare Part A like Apple. And Part A, there's no additional premium when you get on Medicare. You've already paid for it with your Medicare taxes your whole career. Every time you got your pay stub and you were like, FICA taxes and Medicare taxes and things like that. One of the reasons you were paying those Medicare taxes was Part A. So there's no additional cost to get Part A. So even if you're still working, you want to go ahead and get Part A because there's no additional cost for it per month when you get on that. And that's, like I said, hospitalization. So if you're not working, you for sure want to get Part A. If you are still working, there's no reason not to get Part A because there's no cost. Then if you do have to go to the hospital, even while you're still working, Medicare will be your primary, and then your FEHB will be your secondary, as we'll talk about in a second. Then if you're still working, though, you can elect to get Part B or not. And Part B, like B as in boy, that's the one we get the most questions on. And it's, there's an article I wrote a long time ago called To Be or Not to Be, because everybody always wonders, should I take Part B or should I not? Because Part B is the one where there is an additional premium per month once you get on Medicare.
Option P for premium and penalty.
Yeah, exactly. Because there is a penalty maybe if you don't take it, as we'll talk about in a second. And again, that's why so many people are wondering, what should I do with Part B? And Part B, first of all, is outpatient care and doctor's visits. That falls under the Part B part of Medicare. A is hospitalization, B is outpatient and doctor's visits. And as of right now, the recording of this in September 2023, the Part B cost is $164 and change, almost $165 for the premium at its start. It could potentially be higher for you, but it's around $165, let's call it. And so do you want to take that? Do you want to pay that? Well, first of all, if you're still working, you do not have to take Part B. If you're still working and you have FEHB, you have your creditable coverage, you don't have to get Part B yet. You can say, I just want Part A, and I can wait on Part B, and you'll have a special enrollment period later where you can get it with no penalty. Okay, so you don't have to take Part B if you're still working. If you have a spouse that while you're still working, your spouse gets to Medicare age first, if you're still working and they're covered under your plan, they also do not have to take Part B. There's no penalty. If they're covered under your coverage, they reach Medicare age first. They also do have the option, though, of taking Part B if they would like, to maybe have some additional coverages, but there's not going to be a penalty for them either if they're covered under your policy. And then to be clear, once you separate down the road, let's say you're 65, you take Part A, you wait on Part B because you're still working, and then 2 years later, around age 65, you separate. Then within 63 days of your separation date, you have to get Part B at that time with no and you won't have a penalty if you enroll during that special enrollment period. However, if you become 65 and you are not working, and you don't have credible coverage, you're not working, you're not covered under a spouse's plan, something like that, and you approach 65, you have an enrollment period of 3 months before your 65th birthday, the month of your 65th birthday, and then 3 months after. So a 7-month window to get Part B or not. And if you get Part B during that time, you will pay the premium and you will not have a penalty. If you decide, I don't want Part B, I don't want to pay an extra $165 a month, and then a couple years down the road, you try to get back into Medicare Part B, you're going to have a penalty. Every 12 months past when you were eligible to get it with no penalty, and you wait, for every 12 months, there's a 10% penalty. So for every year past you waiting, you're going to pay an additional 10%. So if you waited 4 years and then you try to get back into Medicare Part B, you're going to pay a 40% penalty for the rest of your life. So to be clear, your Part B is going to be 40% higher than your friend who did get it when they were first eligible, and now you're paying 40% more forever. You know, if you watch Sandlot, my dad used to say forever, you know, not for a period of time, unfortunately.
That's a blasphemy of the past, buddy.
Yeah, I know. Now I'm going to watch that with my kids tonight. I love that movie. And so you'll pay that forever. You're stuck with a higher cost. And so now some people say, well, why do I need Part B? I've got FEHB. I've got my health plan. Maybe you have TRICARE. Well, if you have TRICARE, to get TRICARE for life, you have to get Part B. You're going to be required to enroll in it. You pay that, then you pay a small
That's
TRICARE.
military coverage for regular FERS, in case you're wondering.
Yeah, some people are like, what's TRICARE? Well, a lot of our employees that work with the federal government, they come from the federal system, and so some of them have that TRICARE. But your FEHB, you know, you're saying, well, why do I need that? I've got decent copays. It's not too bad. Do I even need Part B? Well, you don't necessarily need it, or you don't have to have it, but it can be a great plan to have and a good part of Medicare, because Medicare will become your primary. So you've got A, it's your primary with hospitalization. Then you get Part B, and it's your primary with doctor's visits and outpatients. And what happens is you've got all these co-pays and co-insurance and things like that. Part B will pay it, and then your FEHB will fill in the gaps and pay most, if not all, of what's left. And now you have no co-pays, no co-insurances for most services that are Medicare approved, and it's good coverage and helps on a fixed income, helps you know what your costs are. a lot of people say, well, the Part B is not really worth it because it's just doctor's visits, it's just things like that. Well, more and more medical services are shifting to outpatient, and a lot of that does fall under Part B. For example, we've had a lot of clients that unfortunately have gotten diagnosed with cancer, or their spouse has, and a lot of those cancer treatments and chemotherapy and things like that fall under outpatient, fall under Part B. And if you don't have Part B under some FEHB plans, you might pay 20% co-insurance of those cancer treatments. And so that can be very, very expensive. Whereas if you have the Part B, you wouldn't pay that. The 20% was paid for most services like that. Now, again, you might say, well, I don't have cancer and I don't think I'm going to get it. I'm healthy. Why do I get that Part B? Well, again, to prevent from paying a penalty later on, and giving you the flexibility that if you want to switch plans, if you want to go to a different plan or a Medicare supplement or a Medicare Advantage, all of those you do
Or if
need.
anything changes for FEHB too in the future, and then you're
Exactly.
like, oh, geez, I didn't sign up for Part B. Now you got a hefty penalty and your FEHB coverage changed or got too expensive or whatever. You're kind of hedging your bets both ways.
Exactly. Yep. It's a great point. There could be a change that we don't see, and the government may stop subsidizing the FEHB, and that cost gets so expensive. It's way better to go get a supplement, or like Steven said, just the plan itself you're on. They do change the co-insurance or co-pays, or a lot of the plans, even if you try to switch open season. So having A and B basically gives you flexibility and gives you the power of choice, where you can make a different choice in the future with no penalty, in addition to having additional coverages and things like that. So if you can afford the Part B, and by afford it, I mean, it might be tight, but you can make it happen. Usually it makes a lot of sense to get the Part B, despite what a lot of people will say and a lot of online gurus and things will try to tell you. If it was me and I was getting on Medicare, most of the time, if not always, I would get Part B. And so I highly recommend that for most people. Now, sometimes where maybe you don't want to get Part B, some of the things that we've seen is if you either have a very, very, very high income, or maybe your spouse does, it's $164.90 to start. But if you, as a married couple, make more than $194,000 a year, you jump up, and it's a higher cost per year. And then there's a couple other income thresholds where it just keeps going up and up. And sometimes people can be paying quite a hefty Part B premium, where maybe it's not worth it. And so maybe in that case, it's not worth it. Now, one cool thing with that, though, is I hear this a lot, Steven, where people are like, well, I was married. I was, a pretty high step. My spouse made pretty good money. We made 300,000-400,000 a year. So my Part B is going to be really, really high because they look back 2 years. And so it's not worth it. Well, keep in mind that you are able to fill out a life event form with Medicare. If you're retiring and your income is going to go way below that, or not even way below, but any below the $194,000 threshold, or $97,000 if you're an individual, if it goes below those income thresholds, you can fill out a form with OPM and Social Security saying, look, we did make this much money, but we're retiring, or my spouse is retiring, or whatever. And you can prove our income is going to be going down, and then you can get your Part B premium lowered into the lower income bracket, so therefore you're not paying that higher penalty. So definitely, before you make those decisions, you should look at all of your options with Medicare, and your income, and is there ways to show that your income's going down. So you're able to have A and B, and then some FEHB plans out there too. We can't list it here publicly because in some regions they actually don't do this, but look into your FEHB plans in the area, and some of the plans will reimburse you and pay you a portion of your Part B premiums as well. So if you get on Part B, a lot of people ask, okay, well, I get on Medicare. Now Medicare is paying most of my bills. So my FEHB cost is going to go way down, right? Well, unfortunately not. You're going to still pay the same cost, But there are some FEHB plans where they will reimburse you a portion of your Part B premium, and maybe some for you and some for your spouse. So take a look at those health plans too. When you end up getting on Part B, your net cost is a lot lower than you think, because some of the plans will send you a check at the end of the year to pay for that Part B cost. So if you can't afford Part B, or you don't get Part B, or you're on this call and and listening to the podcast and you haven't got Part B before, you still have good coverages. It's not the end of the world. You may want to look at getting Part B and see how that would help you. And if you've waited a year or only 2 years and you're going to pay a penalty, it might still be worth jumping on it before you wait a couple more years and you pay a really, really hefty penalty as well. It's worth taking a look at and looking at all your options. Now, as far as outside Medicare plans, Medicare Advantage, Medicare supplements, Part D drug plans with Medicare, do you need all of that? Are you going to pay a penalty on Part D, which like D for drugs? So if you have FEHB, that counts as credible coverage towards that Part D, Stephen. So you don't have to get Part D when you're first eligible. If you get that later on and you want to switch to that for whatever reason, you can avoid paying penalties, because your FEHB, if it had the drug coverage, it counts towards that. But if you switch and you get a Medicare supplement and a Part D drug plan, you're going to cancel your FEHB. So be careful. You can't get back into your FEHB if you cancel it and you switch to a supplement and a drug plan. Okay. The key word there is supplement. There is a plan out there, though, called Medicare Advantage. And if you switch to a Medicare Advantage plan in your area, certain Medicare Advantage plans, you can suspend your FEHB and you can put it
cancel.
on. Not cancel. That's the key word. Keyword is suspend. So you put it on hold, essentially, where you can get on this Medicare Advantage plan. And then if you want to get back to your FEHB plan, you can during an open season in the future, and then have it restart the following January. Switch back from the Medicare Advantage to the FEHB. And again, I've posted that on our Facebook page, and people freak out. They're like, don't ever do that. It's irreversible. You'll lose your FEHB. Plus, there's no plan out there nearly as good, and things like that. Well, that, again, it's not irreversible if you're suspending it. If you're going to a supplement, you're canceling. Yes, you cannot get back onto your FEHB. Now, the reason I mention that is, again, I'm not saying everybody should do that or anything, but there are times where it's made sense. For example, I have some clients in Denver. I'll give a perfect example. Their doctors really liked these Medicare Advantage, took the Medicare Advantage, and the federal employee themselves are extremely healthy, Stephen. They don't have any prescriptions. They don't go to the doctor almost ever except for their annual physical. And so they switched to a Medicare Advantage plan that's $0 a month in addition to what they're paying for Medicare Part B. So it's $0 a month, and they suspended their FEHB. And then if things change and that Medicare Advantage is not as efficient, or they get a catastrophic illness, unfortunately, that requires ongoing care and it's expensive on the Medicare Advantage, they can switch back to the FEHB in the future because they suspended it, okay, not canceled it. You can also suspend if you have TRICARE, military coverage like we talked about earlier. You can also suspend your FEHB if you have TRICARE. You can put your FEHB on hold and then take the TRICARE, and then if you want to switch back to FEHB, you can in the future. So Part D, again, you don't need that if you already have medical coverage, FEHB, and yours includes prescription drugs. And then the last one we get a lot of questions about is called Part C. Part C actually is another name for the Medicare Advantage that we were talking about. So you don't need Part C if you have FEHB. It's one or the other. And you can suspend your FEHB to get on a Part C, but you don't need Part C if you do have an FEHB plan, okay? And then you do have the ability to switch in the future. Like if you want to get on a Medicare Advantage down the road, you can. When you're turning 65, it's important to do some research, figure out what you're doing, but look at the ones that are irreversible or cause a penalty. So you don't want to jump on a Medicare supplement. When you're talking to somebody about your Medicare options and that person, that professional is trying to help you decide a Medicare plan, start quizzing them about the federal system. They should know the federal system and be able to come up with answers pretty quick. If they can't, they don't know the federal system, and they could be causing you an irreversible decision that could put you in a situation that is not ideal or maybe not ideal in the future. So make sure the person that you're talking to is able to talk about FEHB and FERS eligibility and things like that pretty quickly so that you don't get, make a mistake. You also don't want to make a decision based on what your brother says or your colleague or your uncle and what they did. That may be good for them, but that doesn't mean it's good for you. And I've talked to a lot of people that have made decisions and now they're paying a big penalty because of what they heard. For example, so many people, Stephen, that I've talked to that waited to get Part B was because their income was so high and they didn't get Part B. And they didn't know that you can file a form saying our income has changed because of a life event, because I retired, or I made money a couple years ago because I sold some real estate or had a business that I don't have anymore. So you really want to make sure that you make decisions based on correct information, people who know what they're saying, and then lastly, everything people tell you, you want to get in writing so you can double check it and verify it before you make that decision. So a high majority of you, again, this is not advice. Not everybody should do this, but in a lot of cases, it makes sense to go ahead and get Part A and Part B. And they're already changing it here where if you're a post office employee, pretty soon here, you're going to be required to get Part B. You don't have a choice. When you're Medicare eligible and you're not working, you have to get A and B. So that could be coming down the road too, maybe. This is not official. I'm not saying it is, but you may be required to get Part B in the future anyway as a federal employee.
We'll probably wind
there
up
are
doing
talks of that.
another podcast on the new postal system once we have more information, which we don't know when that is. It could be next October, but we're not totally sure. But that'll be one to check back on because we'll get more information for you.
Yep, exactly. Whether not just on the Medicare side, but the whole postal health insurance, we have a pretty good understanding of it, but there's still a lot of information up in the air. And Stephen and I are the type too, where we don't like to give information unless we've seen it in writing from the source. So we're still researching that, and we will have an update on the postal health insurance and also how it affects Medicare. And then we may be doing an update here soon anyway in the coming years on Social Security and Medicare, just for everybody, with some potential changes coming down the pipeline. But all of that for today that we've gone over is how it is right now, and then we'll do an update as this is September 2023. So if you're watching this 2 years in the future, look for one of our updated podcasts on Medicare and Social Security, because there'll probably be some changes. So
yeah, it was a lot of great information. Hopefully you guys stuck with us till the end, and hopefully it was helpful. It's about options. It's about having flexibility, knowing your coverages, knowing what's going to work best in your specific situation. So hopefully you got a lot of value out of it and you're awake.
Yeah, we haven't dozed you off. And if you are awake and you did think of some questions and you want to look at your specific situation, you can reach out to us at fedsmartpodcast.com or fedwiseretirement.com, and we can get you some information on Medicare and how it pertains to you and the things to consider for your specific situation. We'd be happy to run through scenarios and answer your questions on that. And then also, as a reminder, throw out any other podcast topics that you'd like to see. We've got a couple other good ones, but the reason we're doing Medicare is we got several people asking us questions, but then also a lot of feedback. Hey, can you do a podcast on Medicare? So if you have any other ideas of podcasts that you'd like us to do on fedsmartpodcast.com, message us some ideas that you'd like to see, or our Facebook page. If you don't follow our Facebook page, we've got a lot of community. And then also lastly, for everybody listening, stay tuned to our next couple episodes. We got a lot of really cool announcements coming, a lot of really cool opportunities to get you guys even more education and more community. We're always trying to help you federal employees out. We've got some really, really exciting things coming in the coming weeks and months. So tune into the next ones. Thanks for listening today. Like Stephen said, hopefully you're still awake, and we look forward to our next episode here soon, and any feedback that you have for us on how we can help you more. Thanks. Have a great one.
Catch you on the next one.
FedSmart podcast is meant for informational purposes only and should not be taken as financial advice. FedSmart, Jesse Black, Steven Puckett, and Federal Retirement Consultants are not affiliated with any government agency or OPM. Jesse Black offers securities through Creative One Securities, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC, and Jesse Black and Steven Puckett offer advisory services through Creative One Securities, LLC, an investment advisor. Federal Retirement Consultants, FedSmart, are not affiliated with Creative One Securities, LLC. For more information, you can visit fedretirementconsultants.com.